troop drawdown halted. The administration concedes the U.S. will maintain a military presence in Afghanistan into 2017. Christianity in Cuba. Will improved relations with the U.S. mean more religious liberty for Cuba's Catholics and other Christians? Cultural poison. A candid look at the negative impact of pornography on people and culture. And dream come true. A special teen has a great story to tell after her close personal encounter with Pope Francis. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, October 15th, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. President Obama, who promised to end the war on his watch in Afghanistan, now says he's keeping thousands of U.S. troops in that country. Jason Calvi reports from the White House tonight.
Brian, the president will keep nearly 10,000 troops in Afghanistan through the end of next year. That number will be cut to 5,500 by 2017 when he leaves office. But President Obama says he's not disappointed to be scrapping his plan to end the war by next year. The president says while Afghanistan has seen progress, security is fragile.
As Commander-in-Chief, I will not allow Afghanistan to be used as safe haven for terrorists to attack our nation again.
So the president says American troops will have two tasks in Afghanistan: fighting terrorism and training Afghan forces. The president says Afghans will fight in major ground combat, not Americans.
But Afghans like these are standing up for their country. If they were to fail, it would endanger the security of us all.
For months, military leaders urged more help for the Afghans fighting the Taliban.
It took him a while to decide, yes, I'm gonna extend this out. Why do you think that was?
It's an important decision, so if they need more time to make sure this is the right one, get into assessments. But clearly in the last few weeks we've seen some recent setbacks which have probably forced the president's hand.
Setbacks, like the Taliban taking over a key northern city last month. After 14 years of war, billions of dollars of funding, and the blood of 2,200 Americans.
I do not send you into harm's way lightly. It's the most solemn decision that I make.
Some presidential hopefuls who will have to decide the next step are backing the move.
I think it's a wise decision to say we're just not going to go running out of there and lose all the things that we had invested over the years.
Republican presidential candidate Jeb Bush says he's glad the president has scrapped his plans to abandon the region, while John McCain says he's pleased with the plan. He does say he still has concerns that the total number will not be enough for the mission. The decision now rests for the next occupant here at the White House. Brian?
Jason Calvi from the White House tonight. Thank you, Jason. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Israel strengthens its military forces on its border with Gaza today. A convoy of Israeli armored personnel carriers and soldiers is visible along the Gaza Strip border. The heightened security follows a recent string of knife attacks on Israelis by Palestinians. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas warns his people to be aware of Israeli plots to undermine Palestine. Meanwhile, a spokesman for Israel calls on Palestinian leaders to condemn these attacks.
There is this violence against innocent civilians, people going and just, using knives against innocent members of the public. Condemn it. If you can't condemn it, you're showing yourself for what you are.
Israel is setting up new checkpoints and putting more police on the streets. Some Middle East experts theorize these lone wolf attacks result from young people being radicalized online. Russia releases footage showing what it says are Russian airstrikes on militant positions in Syria. These recent airstrikes allegedly target a militant storage facility and a command center in Idlib province. Russia says the attacks are meant to weaken the Islamic State group and other terrorists in Syria. Critics say most of the strikes are hitting targets where the Islamic State has no strong presence. Meanwhile, thousands of refugees, many from Syria, are coping with heavy autumn rain in Serbia and Croatia. The migrants often arrive in Europe unprepared for the weather. This man and his family of 4 are from Aleppo, Syria. Aid organizations supply blankets and food to the migrants. The UN Refugee Agency sets up tents to shelter them. A federal judge orders Utah to keep funding that state's Planned Parenthood centers, at least for now. Today's ruling comes amid a lawsuit over the governor's decision to defund the abortion provider. Despite protests, the ruling means federal money will keep flowing temporarily. The Planned Parenthood Association of Utah sued Governor Gary Herbert last month. The lawsuit claims the move to block funds is based on unproven allegations. Undercover videos show evidence Planned Parenthood illegally sells parts of aborted babies for medical research. And the scandal is also taking hold in Europe. Sophia Kuby is director of EU advocacy for the Alliance Defending Freedom. Sophia, tell us how the Planned Parenthood scandal is playing out there in Europe.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. It's coming up more and more. We see that MEPs, members of the European Parliament, take interest in the case cross-party. It is not only one political spectrum that is interested, but it's getting more and more interest among different political groups. Several members of parliament have written several letters actually to the president of the European Parliament, Schulz, to request that IPPF may be banned from European Parliament and from the EU accreditation system, given the gravity of the allegations, at least until the investigations are carried out.
I know you're sharing concerns with the European Commission. Is that independent from the European Parliament, and what weight does it carry?
Well, so you could compare the European Commission to the government of the European Union, although it's not a government in a strict sense, but the European Commission is where the laws originate, and the European Parliament is obviously where it's voted, the representation of the people, of the citizens. Now, the European Commission is also responsible for the funding to IPPF, and two parliamentarians have written questions. It's an official procedure. You can ask questions to the European Commission, and they have to give an official answer that is public, available to everyone. And they have just done so to these two questions. And the questions were basically, is the Commission aware of these videos? Are they aware of this, of all the allegations shown in these videos? Have they looked into this? And are they willing to condemn these practices? And the answer is actually quite outrageous, because the European Commission says, basically, and I cut it short here, say, we are for reproductive health, we are for women's maternal health and women's health, and IPPF is not doing nothing else than participating in a legal tissue donation program. Now, the interesting thing is that the European Commission comes to a conclusion on something where the US administration and the courts have not come to a conclusion yet. And that is actually quite a scandal, I would say, because the European Commission is representing the EU in this, the opinion of the EU. So we will certainly look into this.
Very interesting. Of course, the IPPF is International Planned Parenthood Federation. Sophia Kuby, thanks for joining us from Alliance Defending Freedom International.
Sure, welcome.
And this year's State Department report on religious freedom evaluates nearly 200 countries, including Cuba. We asked the U.S. diplomat in charge of international religious freedom if improved relations between the U.S. and Cuba will impact people of faith on that communist island.
This is a chance for those religious communities, if the agreement helps create an atmosphere that eases some of those restrictions that they face, that could allow religious life to flourish there. We're going to push very hard on behalf of religious freedom with the Cubans.
Vietnam, also cited for limiting the activities of religious groups, slams this report, saying it's not objective and contains errors. Tim Shah with Georgetown University's Religious Freedom Project is with us. Tim, the recent visit of Pope Francis to Cuba has renewed questions about religious liberty there. Are Christians and Catholics in particular getting any more freedom to express their religion?
Well, we can certainly hope so eventually, but so far we haven't seen any big improvements. In fact, the report released yesterday by the State Department shows continuing harassment by the government, restrictions on religious leaders, restrictions on travel, finances, beatings, detentions. There have been some modest improvements. There's some more freedom for religious organizations to operate charitable and educational projects, but so far I'm afraid no big improvements.
Does that report accurately show the plight of Christians in the Middle East?
Yes, it does. The report, in fact, begins with a heart-wrenching description of what happened to Christians in Mosul, Iraq last year, where they were given 24 hours to leave on threat of conversion or death. There's a lot of discussion of the terrible attacks on Christians by ISIS by Boko Haram, by Al-Shabaab, a whole range of non-state actors who are motivated by a violent religious extremist ideology. So there's a lot of discussion of that. And I should say, too, thanks to Ambassador Saperstein, who's head of the Office for International Religious Freedom at the State Department, there is not just words but actions. We're seeing more focus on the plight of religious minorities in the Middle East. There's a new special advisor for religious minorities in the Middle East and South Asia, Knox Thames, who really knows what he's doing and is very concerned about these issues.
Pakistan, one of the 200 countries reported on in this report from the State Department. Explain their blasphemy law and how it affects non-Muslims in Pakistan.
Yes, the blasphemy law is a big issue, and it's great to be talking about this now because just exactly a week from now, President Obama will be welcoming Pakistan's Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to Washington, and we need to urge him to raise this issue. Pakistan's penal code provides for penalties up to death against anyone who blasphemes or dishonors any recognized religion, including non-Muslim religions. But the reality is that these laws are applied almost exclusively against non-Muslims. Some 1,300 people, mostly non-Muslims, have been accused of blasphemy since the late 1980s when these laws took effect. There is one woman, Catholic, Asia Bibi, who is now on her 6th year in prison under a sentence of death on a blasphemy accusation. So this is a terrible issue. Dozens of people have been murdered because of blasphemy accusations. Interestingly, the government itself has not formally executed anybody, but what these blasphemy accusations do is they put a big bullseye on anybody accused and makes them vulnerable to death, murderous assaults by extremist religious organizations.
Tim Shah, we thank you for your insight.
Thank you, Brian.
Coming up, an in-depth look at the negative impact of pornography on our culture. And a small New Mexico town fights outside resistance to a long-held Catholic tradition. It's October 15th, and today we celebrate St. Teresa of Avila, Virgin and Doctor of the Church, who died in 1528. She helped reform the Carmelite order, advised popes, and founded 17 convents. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. There are startling statistics tonight about internet pornography. A survey published by the Journal of Internet Law shows pornography accounts for more than 2/3 of the total pay-per-view internet content market. Even though some pornography websites are free, this growing trend comes with a heavy price. Mark Irons is here with more tonight.
Brian, Bishop Paul Laverde of the Diocese of Arlington says in his 50 years as a priest, he has seen the evil of pornography spread like a plague throughout culture. I spoke with experts who say pornography is affecting both men and women, and it's ruining marriages, and children are being exposed to pornography at an early age. And the issue goes well beyond the pages of a magazine. This week, Playboy magazine announced it will stop running nude photos in its U.S. print edition. It's changing its marketing approach because you don't need a magazine when pornography is all over the internet.
Today, we can't afford not to talk about pornography as a public health crisis because it is harming every family in America.
Patrick Truman leads an organization dedicated to fighting the problem of pornography. Some studies say over 50% of divorce cases cite internet pornography as a factor in the breakup. And on average, boys are first exposed to pornography at 12. That's about the age Catholic blogger Matt Ahero was when he first looked at pornography. For years, he battled an addiction, and it affected his marriage. Now he helps others through his writing.
My overall arch, right, is how men can become the man God has called them to be. And they can't do that if they got any kind of chains on them. And I would argue the biggest chain man has today is pornography.
But there have been some victories in the battle. Just this week, Hyatt Hotels announced they won't provide pornography on demand. Catholic psychologist Mikhail Vanish says more can be done within the church.
You know, this problem, first and foremost, it needs to be more openly discussed. I think the church would do well to concentrate on starting to develop a real infrastructure of peer group support.
U.S. bishops will be releasing a formal statement on the pornography issue before the end of the year. The statement will emphasize the effects of pornography on marriages and families. It will also attend to those harmed by pornography use and addiction, Brian.
Mark Irons, thank you. The New Mexico town of Belen, Spanish for Bethlehem, fights to keep a year-round nativity scene on city property. The Wisconsin-based Freedom From Religion Foundation accuses Belen of violating the U.S. Constitution, displaying religious art on city property. The city's mayor says those who oppose the nativity scene are outsiders. They don't understand the history and culture of New Mexico's deep Hispanic and Catholic ties. Jera Cordova, mayor of Belen, New Mexico, joining us from that city, just about a half hour south of Albuquerque. Jera, would you describe the significance of the name of your town, how it applies to this tradition and the issue you're now facing?
Absolutely. Well, back in, I would say the middle of July, we received a letter from an organization that was asking, us to remove a nativity scene that has existed in our town for about 25 years at this point. It is a nativity scene that represents who we are as a people, 275 years of history in our town, as well as represents our name. The meaning of our town, of course, is Bethlehem, and we have a long tradition of representing that here.
What do you think can be done to protect that tradition against what appears to be outside resistance to it?
Yeah, well, we do have that organization that out of Wisconsin is trying to fight us on this issue. And we have taken a firm stance that the nativity scene in the heart of our town is going to stay right where it is. We have no intention of removing it or moving it. The organization, of course, is continuing to put pressure on us, and we anticipate that they aren't going to relent anytime soon. So we are exploring other options for this, including making that property private. But at this time, it's staying right where it is.
Why is this so important to the people of your town? There's a rich tradition here, isn't there?
Yes. Our town has had, when we were established back in 1740, 275 years ago, we were established as Nuestra Señora de Belén, which is Our Lady of Bethlehem. It was a land grant at the time, and it is a tradition of Catholic faith as well as other faiths in town that we have represented since that time. And I believe the Nativity represents that for our people here.
Mayor Cordova, are you at all concerned that you, this little town in New Mexico, can stand up to this foundation that's going to really come down hard trying to get what it wants?
Sure. Well, we understand that this organization does have some resources at its disposal that a small town generally doesn't. We do not have a lot of money to fight this in court, and I think they understand that. But right now, they are only sending us letters and threatening us. At no point have they filed in court. And so we understand that if it does come to court, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for us.
Mayor Jera Cordova from Belen, New Mexico, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, the Little Sisters of the Poor continue their care of the elderly in the face of a drawn-out legal battle. And a young woman who dreamed of meeting Pope Francis shares her dream come true. You pay God a compliment by asking great things of him. Beautiful words from St. Teresa of Avila, whose feast day we celebrate today. St. Teresa, pray for us. Thanks for joining us on this Thursday, October 15th. I'm Brian Patrick. As the Little Sisters of the Poor await a response from the U.S. Supreme Court, they receive widespread support. They're seeking an exemption from the federal government's contraceptive mandate. The Vatican says the surprise visit of Pope Francis to Washington's Jean Giogon home was a sign of support. The Becket Fund for Religious Liberty represents the Little Sisters as well as EWTN. It expects to hear soon if the Supreme Court will consider the case. It is good to have Kristina Arriaga, Executive Director of the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, with us. What have you heard about the Pope's visit to the Little Sisters?
I heard about it shortly before the Holy Father arrived. They were so excited. And the Holy Father wanted to meet just with them, not with the residents. I met and talked to each one of the sisters and encouraged them in their vocation of service for the poor and the elderly. They were very excited.
Well, Pope Francis and popes before him have always supported the work of the Little Sisters of the Poor. Do you think this was a purposeful show of support for their legal battle?
The Vatican spokesperson shortly after the visit said that the Holy Father's visit was in support of their legal fight, and the LA Times broke that story that same night.
So what kind of judicial support are the Little Sisters getting?
there have been significant developments for the Little Sisters in the world of law. A lower circuit issued a very strongly worded opinion supporting religious ministries and saying that conscience is the very essence of a moral person's identity. And it even went on to say Thomas More went to the scaffold, went to his death, rather than sign a little piece of paper for the king. So we see a lot of judges that are saying the government is dead wrong, this is dangerous, the Little Sisters, the religious ministries are right.
Can't the government find other ways to distribute these drugs without imposing this on a religious order like the Little Sisters of the Poor?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When he created the exchanges, he could have simply created a contraceptive exchange, abortion-causing drug exchange, but it refused to do so. And he has already exempted, as you well know, millions of Americans from having to comply with this mandate, and yet he still pursues the Little Sisters.
I have to admit that I'm a big supporter of the Little Sisters, so I might be a little bit biased on this, but do you think if our leaders would really get a sense of what the Little Sisters do, if they would go to one of their homes and experience this ministry, that they would continue with this campaign?
It's inexplicable that the government's still pursuing this. They know what the Little Sisters do, and they still doggedly are pursuing and trying to force the Little Sisters under penalties of hundreds of thousands of dollars unless they comply with the government.
So are you confident that you're going to hear something from the High Court, what, in a few months or so?
We expect that before Thanksgiving, we will hear from the Supreme Court on whether or not the Supreme Court is going to hear the religious ministry cases, or whether it's going to consolidate some or just hear the Little Sisters. But we do expect that before Thanksgiving, the Little Sisters will hear. So then what's next once they do, if they do? Well, if they do, then there will be an oral argument in the spring, and the lawyers get to appear before the Supreme Court and argue on behalf of the Little Sisters and the religious ministries, and we will have a decision sometime before the summer.
Keep us up to date.
Will do.
Kristina Arriaga with the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty. Well, while in Washington last month, Pope Francis met with the Little Sisters, the President, the Speaker of the House, seminarians, even the homeless. But there was another brief and powerful encounter that attracted very little attention at the time. Catherine Szeltner has that story tonight.
It's crazy. It's like, okay, let's do this thing.
Teresa Brogan still laughs in shock at her memories from just 3 weeks ago. She's part of a group of kids with special needs who created a video welcoming Pope Francis to D.C. At the summer launch party, Teresa told me what she'd say to Pope Francis on the off chance of meeting him.
You're awesome and I love you. You're awesome.
The 16-year-old had no idea her dream would play out like this.
I was crying and like, oh my gosh, and then I just walked, hugged him, took a moment and come back.
Teresa was invited to greet Pope Francis at DC's Vatican Embassy on behalf of the St. Joseph House, a daycare home serving children with disabilities.
I was thinking to hug him, and also I told him my friend's mom just passed away.
Her friend's mom is Kuby LaHood, the founder of St. Joseph's House. LaHood died the week of Francis's U.S. visit. Meanwhile, Teresa's mom was in the security line for the canonization mass during the papal embrace.
I received a text from one of my friends, and the text said, "Oh my goodness, I'm watching television and Teresa is hugging the Pope."
While she didn't see the exchange firsthand, Mary Brogan knows it was a loving lock.
Everybody comes with their unique gifts, and you could see in his face the recognition of that.
And a powerful encounter for her teenage daughter.
You see holiness, you recognize it. You may not be able to articulate it, but you recognize it.
So what does the lucky girl who got to hug the Pope want to share with us all?
Pope Francis is really cool. You all love him.
Because the founder of St. Joseph's House died just 2 days before, Teresa's mom believes the Pope Francis hug involves some divine intervention. One thing is clear, the quick embrace was an emotional moment for the entire family. Brian.
What a great example of love for all of us. Absolutely. Catherine Szeltner, thank you. Until tomorrow, we encourage you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. If you'd like to watch again, you can go to EWTN's YouTube page. For the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night. God bless.